we're going live, but go ahead.
Oh, never
Say it
mind.
anyway.
Then I won't say it.
You guys just missed Alex giving me the greatest compliments about how he loves all that I'm doing. He didn't really say anything about AD. It was all about me.
I got to give my love to my Baptist brethren.
Of course.
That's right.
The first thing that I said when Matt said that Alex is going to be on, I said, "A Baptist, gross."
He says that every time a Baptist is on, including myself. Every time you're going to be on.
Accurate.
Gross.
Here's the deal though, and this is what's fun about this is I relate to you, Matt, because you've been in Calvary Chapel. I grew up Calvary Chapel, but here's the thing about Calvary Chapel: they keep accidentally creating Calvinists, and so now I'm Reformed Baptist, and I'm like minus like the baptism thing. That's like very very close. So like I feel like I'm in the middle here, which is funny because your show is supposed to be about evangelical meets Reformed. Except let's face it, Matt, you're Reformed. Just admit it.
Don't tell me about my own show.
Good point.
I never would have thought so many people would have had opinion about how the show idea is terrible and that I'm really Reformed. Never would have saw that.
It's a great premise, but you can only read the Bible for so long until you become a Calvinist.
Oh my goodness.
I agree. It's a good show idea, but you can't help it.
I'm honestly I'm not like saying I'm not a Calvinist. I totally believe in election that God chooses. I just think that men reject God too. And there's like some free will in that. Or you could say it this way. I think God chose everyone. All right. So let's just start the show. Stop getting me in trouble. Alex, I decided probably like 2 days ago that I don't like introducing guests with a long list. So can you just tell us why we should listen to you and how great you are?
No, I don't know if I can tell you that.
Just tell some credentials about you then.
Fair enough. I can do that. By the way, I can't see either one of you guys, which is making me really sad right now. But okay, what's my deal? Boy, I went to Liberty University. Don't tell anyone though. Yeah. No, I had a great experience there. I grew up in the Calvary Chapel movement. So Arminian, dispensational, discovered Reformed theology in grad school. Anyway, I spent a couple years as a youth pastor. Now I am basically in charge of recruitment for a missions agency. And I do a lot for them. I podcast for them. I'm the managing editor of the blog, do a couple different things. And so I get to kind of, live in this evangelical world of conferences and working with churches. But I've also got a wife and I've got 2 kids and one on the way. And I'm sorry, Adam, but none of them are baptized yet. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
The Lord still loves you,
Yeah, you're not a heretic. Can we bring out the heretic? It seems like everyone's using that word nowadays.
They are dedicated though, which is a dry baptism. Let's face it.
I accept that. I don't know about officially if that counts, but hey.
Yeah, that is kind of weird though. What is up with us Baptists dedicating babies? Like, is that just our kind of our out from the Presbyterian?
I'm going to stay out of this one.
I think it is. I really think it is.
Yeah, I think so too. It's funny, is my kid's not baptized or dedicated or baptized, actually. I should probably get on that one way or another. Yeah, maybe I'll take him to the Fight Laugh Feast network and just give him to David. Have him do it. So that's thank you, by the way, for coming on the show. That's awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Taking a career risk.
Good. Yeah.
Hold on. Alex. Micah in the comments. He has a question for you. Why does everyone who graduates from Liberty seem to be embarrassed about it? Good question, Micah. Good question, Micah.
This is true. Well, let me put it this way. Real talk. I went tubing one time with Jerry Falwell Jr. That was interesting. So Jerry and I are broskies. Yeah, it was interesting. But it's just, there's just a few things. But honestly, Liberty gets a bad reputation because of Twitter or whatever. But the experience on campus is really solid. My only concern with that school is that it's just becoming kind of just a big evangelifish sort of partyish school. There's solid people there. There's tons of solid people.
Yeah.
But it just, anytime you get big, there's mission drift. So, that's the unfortunate thing. But that's also where I discovered Reformed theology, which they wouldn't be happy to hear that.
No, they would not. Little known fact about me, I actually took 2 online classes at Liberty, and I enjoyed them both. I learned a lot.
Wow.
There you go.
What
2 did you take? Maybe I was your instructor.
I took a systematic theology class, which was not as good, but then I took a hermeneutics class, was actually pretty good.
All right.
Yeah.
And Alex, you have a podcast.
I do.
Where can people find that?
Yeah, missionspodcast.com. It's literally called The Missions Podcast. So we talk about missions and theology and practice from a conservative, biblical, big God, Reformed sort of perspective. But basically, all the drift that you see in evangelicalism, it's multiplied on the mission field. It really is, because there's this sense of, well, I'm going out into another culture, and so I'm just going to check my theology at the door. And there's a lot of overreaction against whether it's colonialism, imperialism, whatever that looks like. But the reality is that there's a huge need for people in missions to just say simple, solid things like, hey, evangelism means using your words and actually proclaiming the gospel, or churches need elders. So a lot of what we do is just kind of contending for, some sound basic theology in the realm of missions, but we also have missionaries come on, share their stories. It's a cool thing. Missionspodcast.com. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And are you on the social media sites?
I am. I'm on the Twitters. At AJ Kocman, at AJKOCMAN. I'm on Facebook and Instagram too, but that's whatever. Most of my but my Instagram's just pictures of my kids and Bible verses, really. So if you're into that, you can feel free to follow me there too.
Perfect. All right. We'll put also that in the show notes as well. So something that we do on the show every single time, and it wasn't even planned, we just fell into it, is we have a conspiracy theory segment. Now, someone in the show notes has a conspiracy theory of their own. They think, AD, you really want Big Eva to succeed, the SBC, the Gospel Coalition, because it's going to give you unlimited show content. What say you to that, sir? Is that true?
Who said this?
I believe it was Micah. He's a troublemaker. Yeah, it was.
This is super interesting, because I literally was talking to my wife an hour ago, and I said that Gospel Coalition could shut me down right now. All they got to do is stop producing this content. I'd have nothing to say. I'd have nothing to say.
It's true though. Like, for this show, there's never a scarce amount of show content. There is always plenty of stuff to talk to.
Yeah, listen. I take probably what is a lot of work. Let's just be honest. What Gospel Coalition produces, it probably takes a lot, and I take that, and then I put my camera on. It cost me $50 to buy this camera, and then for an hour I talk about some things, and then I cut it down to like 20 minutes, and I make a couple bucks off it. It's cool.
Now you're just bragging.
And here's the deal. I am sympathetic towards some of these big blog websites, because as the managing editor for a blog, I get it. Like, sometimes you're just throwing content up there.
You have to.
Maybe
you need
you're not reading. Yeah. It's because social media and like daily content is just this black hole that's never satisfied, right? So you're just throwing content up there, and it's like, is it radical? Okay, post it. I'm not saying that I have low standards I'm not saying I have low standards.
I get it. No, I get it.
But I am saying there's like, So I'm sympathetic towards them. But we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves. My gosh, we've got to not take ourselves so seriously. My goodness gracious.
Yeah,
I love how you.
Honestly, that's really the thing. I think, Alex, that's a good point, because honestly, I can forgive, and I think most normal people. I am sort of normal, I think, but we can forgive, an errant article here and there, or a stupid article about how you can find the gospel in the new Pixar movie or something like that. But like, we can accept that. But what we can't accept is that when somebody, ribs you a little bit for that one, like, yeah, that was pretty stupid. There is no gospel in the movie Coco, like freaking out about that and saying, oh, that's unchristlike. That's just ridiculous. Like, that's what we don't like that. It's just, come on. It's all in good fun here.
And here's the thing. I think everybody, when you get them offline, right, when you're hanging out, you're having a drink together, like everybody knows how to laugh about these things. But as soon as it's public or as soon as it's on social media, everybody gets really serious and moral and indignant about it.
This is so true.
It's emotionally exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting for us to be taking ourselves so seriously all the time.
And listen, like I joke on Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff, and I try not to take things too seriously. I try not to get triggered, but like, to be honest, like, it's tempting sometimes to get triggered by something someone says online. It is, and sometimes I'll admit that I have to be like, you know what, not worth it. Not going to comment. I try to play as cool as a cucumber, but it's not always like that in the moment.
Yep. That is true. So back to my favorite part of the show is...
Oh, we totally derailed that. I'm sorry, Matt.
Yes, guys. This is the segment that makes the show. We can't leave it. Okay. We'll come back to that all serious stuff in a little bit. The coronavirus. Did you hear about this? Dean Koontz wrote about it back in 1980s. There's this book called The Eyes of Darkness by Dean Koontz, a pretty familiar guy, right? Or popular artist, novelist. It said around 2020, a severe pneumonia-like illness will spread from Wuhan, the province of China. And they said Wuhan. They call this stuff Wuhan 400 because it was developed at their rDNA labs outside the city of Wuhan, and it was the 400th viable strand of man-made microorganism created at the center, and it was going to be released in 2020. The guy who wrote this 40 years ago called the exact year, place, and symptoms.
There's more to this. Where is this from? Where is
this? The Eyes of Darkness.
No. Where did you hear this, Matt?
It's the book. I'm reading the pages. On social media, of course, where everything true happens.
There it is.
It is, and it's on page 666. No, I'm just kidding. I don't actually see the page number in the screenshots, but
actually 616, guys, in the original text. It's 616. Okay.
It's so crazy. But like, I don't know, in all seriousness, it's pretty crazy how serious like some of these people are taking it. The WHO, which is, the health organization, I forgot what it is, World Health Organization. They said it's time to pull out all the
You should definitely just call them the WHO.
The WHO. Yeah, it's
the WHO.
Do you guys still think this was all an accident, or do you think this is maybe something on purpose?
Yes, you take that. You take that, AD.
Alex, end your career. Answer this question.
Listen.
So I do have an informed opinion on this, but I'll go last.
Okay.
So here's my uninformed opinion. Basically, I think it's a very safe bet. Lots of times when people ask you a question like this, is whatever the media is saying, just pick the opposite. So that's what I choose. All right. I think it's not an accident because the media says it is.
Got it. I like that. Yep, that's right. 75% odds. That's right.
It's completely uninformed, and you can be wrong a lot of times. But if someone's asking you don't know, just bet.
Just pretend you're a blog and you need to throw content up.
Just bet against the mainstream media. That's all you gotta do.
I don't know if I have any opinion as to if anyone's behind it. I don't literally have an opinion about that, but I just find it interesting that, the annual flu season that we all get the flu. I mean, that's leftover from the 1918 flu outbreak that killed a ton of people. I don't know the exact numbers. So, in reality, we'll probably all get coronavirus at some point, and it's entirely possible that 50 years from now, you're going to have coronavirus season every winter, and it's just going to be another thing that everybody's inoculated against, because it's not overly fatal. But we actually just recorded a podcast on this. On our show, we consulted our missionary medical doctor that consults all of our field teams worldwide, including the ones in Asia, because we've had to give advice to people. Anyway, it was pretty interesting. It was pretty informative. But
did you just say wash your hands?
There's a sweet spot between complete hysteria, and complete skepticism.
Yeah.
And I'm usually skeptical about everything. I'm like, this is not a big deal. This is gonna be like swine flu. Everybody's gonna forget about it. But honestly, we did stock up on some groceries.
I'll tell you right now, I got swine flu. Did you guys know that?
What?
Yeah, when swine flu came out, I had the flu at that. It was like a summertime. I was living in New York City, and I didn't get tested, but it clearly was the new flu that was going around. And it's kind of sucked. I'm not going to lie.
I didn't realize it was a racist flu. Jeez. Us white people never got it.
That's what I'm saying, man. No, I was like, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, I was sick for a week and it was awful, and then I recovered. But yeah, no, I agree with you, Alex. I'm not the kind that freaks out and this kind of stuff. But what I did, the reason why I did, maybe makes a few extra plans is because I don't trust people's reactions. So people are going to freak out, and so that's what I'm thinking. So, you don't, there's no hysteria, no despair, baby, but it's okay to have some strategy in times like this.
You should make a shirt.
Serenity now. Serenity now.
Right. Yeah. And my advice too is like, you don't buy like a bunch of MREs that are super expensive that you're not going to ever eat in your life. You buy stuff that eventually you will eat. So if nothing happens, yeah, Brittany, my wife, is in the chat today. And she says, I stocked up on Vienna sausage. That's true. Because I do enjoy a good Vienna sausage.
That's so funny. I'm totally right there with you. And I was applying that to the stock market. As I got out of the stock market, I'm not getting back in until it's run its course through the US. Then I think
But the Dow went back up. The Dow went back up. So I checked my Roth today, and it's back at its original value from like 2 weeks ago. So I'm feeling a lot better. I'm a long-term investor.
That's right. Yeah, that's the best strategy. You just buy and just hold it forever.
Yeah, you buy, and you put your head in the sand, and you pop up and hope 2008 didn't happen again.
That's my plan.
Just as long as you're not retiring in 2008, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so my coronavirus theory is I originally thought that it was just incompetence by the communists. And it was basically like a Chernobyl kind of a thing where they try to cover it up and it's not as bad. And then they finally have to admit it's pretty bad, that kind of a thing. But then from China's news, source,
I saw that. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So in communist countries, you don't have free press like you do here. Laughing because we don't have free press here. But you say exactly what the Communist Party wants you to say, right? And this is what they said. Be bold. The world owes China a thank you, which says if China imposes restrictions on pharmaceutical exports, U.S. will be plunged into the mighty sea of coronavirus. That doesn't sound like you made an accident and you're covering it up. That seems like kind of a threat to me.
You know what it sounds like to me? Sounds like they're trying to do their best Donald Trump impression.
Yeah, guys, have you seen this thing going around Twitter? This one guy like imitating Trump after one day in seminary. That thing won all the internets, as far as I'm concerned.
I didn't see it, man.
His impression of Trump is amazing. Yeah, he's just like rambling about like covenantal nomism and NT Wright, and it's hilarious. It's the best Trump impression, but that's not related.
No, I watched that.
Honestly, that statement from the Chinese guy, I mean, that kind of stuff is like straight out of 1984, Ministry of Truth. Like, I'm not going to trust anything that they say. But I don't think that I still think that China has some self-interest because this has crippled them. Everything is closed. 70% of grocery stores and convenience stores is the only thing that's open. It's not in their interest to destroy their own people and economy. So,
but whatever, got out of the Hong Kong thing.
No,
right?
I haven't heard much from Hong Kong in all of this, but I don't know.
Yeah, the funny thing about diseases, they really scatter crowds really quickly.
This is true.
All right, let's have a question from our Twitters for you when they heard, Alex, that you were going to be on the show. How can someone differentiate between a sincere desire to be involved in long-term missions and a desire for the Instagrammable wanderlust dressed up as missions? And I got tons of likes and retweets on that. So that's a pretty popular question.
Yeah, I saw that question. That was from our good friend Michael Foster with It's Good to Be a Man. So he's a friend of our show too. So Michael, if you're listening, what's up? And that's a great question. And there's a great little booklet put out by 9 Marks by Andy Johnson. And it's just called Missions. And it's full of wisdom that's like stuff that I think we would look at. It's pretty basic. It's kind of obvious, but nobody's saying it. So basic things like, listen, if your pastors and elders aren't affirming your calling, you're probably not called. Because in Acts 13, God doesn't just give one person like this kind of magical liver quiver. And so they think, oh, well, I'm going to go out and do this romantic missions thing. No, he calls the pastors and elders of the church. They have to affirm it. You know, I'm convinced that missionary is essentially an office of the church. I mean, you could argue that it is or it isn't, but the qualifications for elder have to apply there too. So what matters more is the affirmation and the objective external calling of others in the local church, more than just how I feel subjectively. I mean, having a desire, that's great. But if the local church isn't recognizing it, that's part of it. The other thing is you really have to weigh out, are there other reasons in my life that I could be interested in missions right now? We've had a couple popular articles on our site by a female missionary who's writing about those sorts of things. Is it missions or is it wanderlust? And the reality is, if somebody's single, if somebody's having a hard time finding a spouse, there's a lot of attractiveness to, well, I'm just going to serve Jesus. I'm just going to go off and I'm going to explore other cultures. And you know what? That's not wrong. That's not bad. But it's not the same thing as having a burden for souls. You got to ask those questions. There's a lot of modern missions that's just wanderlust. And the problem with it is that we don't just need any warm body going to the mission field. We need men and women, but we especially need men because there's a shortage of men. But we need men and women, but particularly men that can lead, that can preach, that can plant churches, that can lead them in biblical ways. And man, I mean, you look out on the landscape of America and you're like, well, that's what we need here. There's so much less of that abroad.
Right. So, you know, it's interesting with that question. It kind of presupposes a younger demographic that go into missions. And you were kind of alluding to that too with single women or even single men. So is the people going into missions younger? Well, because in my mind, it's the old people for some reason. I don't know if that's fact-based or not. But like, is it younger people, older people mixed?
So short-term missions. Short-term missions is a multi-million-dollar industry. That's the reality. And so there's a lot of people that are young that are doing that. But in my mind, the vast majority of that's done really poorly. And there's good attempts at short-term missions. We do short-term missions, but we do that in a healthier way where the whole point is to serve the long-term team that's on the ground, all that kind of stuff. So you're seeing young people do that. For me, the people that I work with are the people that are ready to take a serious long-term step, be a career missionary. Those people are, I think, trending older. I think it used to be, 50 years ago, you get out of Bible college and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go serve Jesus. And that's not happening. I'm seeing it's more people who are like mid-30s, maybe 40s. They've got kids. They've finally paid off their student loans. They're probably 10, 15 years into a career, maybe local church staff, something like that. But they're like, okay, now we're at a place where we can make a longer-term decision. And our kids are still young in school age, but now we're going to step out. So 30s-ish. And that's like the youngest that I'm seeing pursue long-term missions. And there's a lot of steps along the way. You could do an internship, apprenticeship, that kind of stuff. But it's just like everything else. People do delay adulthood, and adolescence keeps kind of getting stretched out.
Yeah. I was going to say, though, when you were saying older people, I wasn't expecting you to throw out our age.
Well, if older than like the teenagers that you think of going on missions trips, older than that, but you're also seeing retirees. You're seeing second career type people. Is that the type of the people that you're seeing more?
Me and missionaries? I honestly don't know. That's just a naive, ignorant view.
You just think that all missionaries are old white people who are fat, who are Baptists, who are whatever. That's your stereotype.
Well, I don't necessarily believe
so not fat. Cool.
No, this is probably where it comes from, is the church I grew up in.
That's the only piece you push back on is the fat part. Everything else, you're like, that's correct.
No, everything else was accurate for sure. I'm thinking back at the church I grew up in, my dad goes to, where you have pictures of all the missionaries, and I always wondered why they're all old people. And so I think I just assumed all missionaries were all old people.
There you go.
I don't know.
There
you go.
All of them are old.
All right, it's time to get you in trouble now, for real, Alex.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of stuff going on in the church right now. It's a very interesting time. We've been talking about it a lot. The SBC, critical race theory. Yeah, you need to take a drink for that. And even today, I don't know if you guys heard this, AD. I don't know if you saw this either. The PCA, your people, AD, you Prespies, are hosting a transgender play
I heard about
Greg
this.
Johnson's Memorial Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, I heard about that. My brother messaged me about that. My brother's an elder in the PCA, and he messaged me about it today. And I haven't had a chance to really look at it, but what I did see did not look good.
And it's interesting to me that it seems like we're fighting the same battle over all these different denominations. So it's not just necessarily like the SBC has a leadership problem, but it seems like there's these attacks, these pushes for these agendas happening all across American Christianity. So, Alex, what do you think about all this?
Man, I agree. It's a problem. I mean, I've been pretty vocal about it. Not in a flaming kind of internet way, but I've written for Founders
Flaming internet
Ministries
way.
a lot on this. Well, you know, like I'm not angry about it, but it's a real problem. And it's a problem in the church because it's a problem in every church, every denomination, every organization. I mean, you know, let's be honest. It's like your quilting club is starting to give way to intersectionality now. You know, I mean, every set. So we shouldn't be surprised that it's affecting the church.
Yeah.
We'd be, and you know, it's like the whole thing with Francis Schaeffer always saying, like, you know, the church is always the last one on board. We're the late adopters for everything. So like at the exact moment that we're starting to think that all of this standpoint epistemology stuff is cool, is the exact moment that the rest of the world is kind of like, this is kind of boring now. Like we're kind of tired of the identity politics.
No, it's so true. You know, and Matt, you know, it's not just an SBC thing, not at all. And
it's not.
You think Alex is being hyperbolic when he says quilting clubs? No, like literally quilting clubs, like literally any kind of thing you can imagine. I remember one of the first things that I knew, one of the first areas that I knew this was infecting was Magic the Gathering. You know, the nerd card game. like there's a whole intersectionality thing there about how it's not a safe space for women, and no women want to play that game. Let's just be honest. No women want to play that game. And they're like, well, there's not enough women here. And so what they do is they start changing the way they do the cards and changing the way they do everything. And it's just nonsense. And so anyway, it's not just that. But you would think, I mean, you would hope that churches would have enough fortitude to say, you know, like, no, no, we're not doing this here. You can do it in Magic the Gathering. You can do it in Dungeons and Dragons if you want to. You can't do it here. And unfortunately, it hasn't shaken out that way. I mean, it's tolerated way too much.
Here's the thing. See if you guys agree with this, but I think it's because we as Christians, we're really prone to guilt manipulation because we know that we're totally depraved. Even Matt, who's not a Calvinist yet, knows he's totally depraved. We've got him on that point.
Right. Yes.
We know we're totally depraved. We know that we're more sinful. We understand indwelling sin. You know, oppression is a real thing, right? Like power dynamics are real things in the world. So when the world wants to throw an accusation against us, like, hey, you have this inherent guilt or you're blind to this error. You know, there's a part of us that I think is genuine Christian humility that says, like, yeah, you know what? Like, I probably do have some sin in that area. Like, maybe I have, you know, secretly had some thoughts that were discriminatory, whatever that is. But it makes us manipulable. We're not walking in the freeness of the gospel.
That's right.
We're not walking in no condemnation. We're condemning we're living in this like Romans 7 thing where like the world is like, you're terrible, you're offensive, and we're like, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. It's so true. And you're right. There is a good part of that. But you need to be able to, to understand that, yes, I'm not perfect, but the truth is that we understand as Christians that the truth is a person. And so a lot of people, I think, would say, if you're more dedicated to the truth than you are to your neighbor, then that's a bad thing. But actually, that's not a bad thing, because the truth is the Lord. The truth is Christ. He is the truth. He said so. So you need to be more dedicated to Christ than your neighbor, than your son, than your father. Like, that's something that we need to all kind of come to terms with. That if this is true, and I know it's true, then that's got to be more important to me than looking good or sounding good or making friends. And I want to make friends too. Every time I say this kind of thing, I always think people are going to say, well, Adam's just a jerk. He doesn't care about people. And it's no, I want to make friends too, but I got to be dedicated to that truth, you know?
Well, if you wanted to make friends, you would stop playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, if your strategy is to have friends, you shouldn't be playing Magic the Gathering. That's the real issue here.
But I caught you in a lie right now.
So Ephesians 4, right? Speaking the truth in love, okay? We misread that. We read that and we think, okay, so there's this spectrum. Over here there's truth and over here there's grace and love. That's not what Paul's saying. Maybe there's an element of accuracy in that. It's the truth in love. It's the way that you love someone is by speaking the truth. It's both together all the time. It's not like, well, I'm more of a truth person, so I'm going to lean into the love, or well, it's not one or the other. It's both, and we don't get that. If I'm not telling you the truth, I'm not truly loving you. So, our 7-year-old son, it's fun, man. Like victimhood mentality is just a part of sin nature. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it, right? It comes with the fall. So right. True. And I'm not loving my son if I don't call him out on like, yo, the Kocmans aren't victims, we're warriors, and that's love. That's love.
Yeah. I talked to someone just the other day that I'm very close with, and I would not in any way say that he's a victim, kind of guy. And there's some circumstances that happened in his life. And he says, and I said to him, I said, you know what? Like, so you're just the victim. That's what you're saying. You're just everyone's against you. And he was so wrapped up in his sin at that moment. He's like, yes. And I'm just like, that's the issue. It's the sin nature that makes us all feel like we're getting something we don't deserve, when we know in our brains that we actually deserve way worse than anything we've ever gotten. Mm. And it's social justice and all of this stuff, all of the stuff that you're seeing with the LGBT community and being promoted in PCA churches and stuff like that. It's all about them being victims. And it's like, it's just this natural inclination that everybody has. And for some reason we're feeding it instead of putting a stop to it, which is what love would do. It's like, no, you're not a victim. You're actually a sinner before God, and he's holy. And you just need to stop.
Can I throw one more thing in there? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm talking too much, but I can't see your faces. So if Matt is like saying like, stop talking, Alex, I'm sorry. I can't see you waving your arms, but
I'll just cut you off.
There you go. Just mute me, just kick me out. But so our son is adopted, and we are working through those conversations. They're tough conversations of, starting to ask questions about like, what is the deal with my biological family? Like, why aren't they taking care of me? The conversations that any adoptive parent would have. And my wife, she is a saint. We're all saints in Christ. She's a saint. She has been explaining to him, because he's really zealous for evangelism in this really cool kind of innocent, little kid way. That's awesome. But she keeps telling him, because he's wondering like, man, like, am I a victim? Like, what's happened to me in my life? What is God's plan? Like, this is confusing. This is hard. I wish it wasn't like this. And my wife has been so good about telling him like, buddy, listen, you're always telling me that you want to share Jesus with your friends more, right? He says, yeah. And she's like, well, you can't tell people Jesus's story, right? And tell people to trust Jesus if you're not trusting Jesus, and if you're not trusting that God is sovereign over your life and your life story. You're saying you need to go trust in this story about Jesus. And she's saying, first, you need to wrap your head around the fact that God's in control, and he wrote this story for your life. You got to believe the gospel, and you got to believe that God's sovereign and good over your life too. Like, that's not separate. And, right. She explains it in a way that makes sense for a 7-year-old. But man, I'll tell you, people think that I'm the preacher, but sometimes, man, my wife gets preaching to our son, and it's good. And if we weren't
don't go there.
I'd be over complimentarian, but
No, but this is so critical. The thing is, like, I say stuff like this about, the African American experience, and God was sovereign in the slave trade. The reality is that many of us are better off. And I always talk about myself because luckily I've got some beautiful African-American DNA in my blood, in my veins right now. And I say, you know what? I'm better off that the slave trade happened. And people start to freak out, triggers all day long. And I go, I'm better off because if I was in Nigeria, where my ancestors were, there's a good chance I'd be a Muslim right now. And God in his sovereignty put my people through that suffering. In his sovereignty, this was his plan. And now the Robles family is a bunch of Christians. All of us, we're all Christians. And we could have just as easily been saying the Shahada all day long to Allah instead of doing this. And it's like, you got to wrap your mind around that. You're not a victim, especially Christians. That's the thing. Like if you're a black or brown Christian and you were imported here through the slave trade, let's say, you gotta wrap your mind around that's part of God's sovereign plan, and you can't shake your fist at the sky with that kind of stuff. You just can't. It's a big deal. Like this victimhood culture thing that we're all talking about here. It's poison to your soul because essentially that's a way to shake your fist at God. I'm not saying that there are not real victims. There are real victims, but let's face it here. Let's face it. Chances are, if you've got an internet connection and a Twitter feed, you're not being victimized that bad.
AD, you say that, but your van didn't get keyed.
Now, you could be a victim still, but at the end of the day, like a lot of the people that we're seeing on stage at a lot of these conferences, that ain't it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got into a Twitter storm with the I left the church crowd, which is a very weird little pop-up thing that's been happening. Have you guys noticed this too? There's this like Me Too group, but for leaving their church. It's really strange. But they were starting to play the victim card for leaving the church. And like, you guys don't know how hard it is to give up your faith. And you don't know how much stress it took me to leave the church. I'm like, are you seriously playing the victim card for quitting? Like, come on, guys.
It probably is very stressful.
Sin is stressful. I told them that, and they thought I was mocking them. I'm like, I'm serious. Sin is tough, man. It's not an easy thing to do.
That's not. But Matt, does that surprise you? Because that doesn't surprise me. Because obviously there's spiritual things going on there. There's also, I think that's also the fruit of parenting and how a lot of millennials were raised. And you get in, although participation trophies are dumb, like that kind of thing. But that is a reality. Is that I do think there was a parenting style that if something's hard, you give up. It's just in the cultural water.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally. It's not only parenting style, but it's also in the like public schooling is all. That's what it's all about, man. Mm-hmm. Oh, you get if something's hard, you go to the special classroom where everything's a lot easier.
Well, not only that, but the way, and I've got a friend who's a teacher, and she was just saying this to us the other day. It used to be that the teacher and the parent were together disciplining the child. Now, if anything happens with the child, it's the parent and the child gang up on the teacher, and the teacher, there's a lawsuit because but like there's the assumption of guilt against the teacher. So no longer is raising children a group process, of raising, of disciplining. It's the immediate assumption of guilt in that direction too. So they're not getting the input from the community.
Mm-hmm.
I had a teacher once. Sorry, Matt. You can't talk in this show.
Anyway, yeah, Matt, just go away.
I'm just gonna lean back and drink.
I had a teacher once, and I'll never forget this for my whole life. And I hated her so much because she kept me inside from recess for what seemed like months. It was probably like a week.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing at Micah's comment right now that Matt is a victim.
Matt is a victim. That's right. Well, that's what you get, Matt, because you're a white male. That's what you get. Anyway, so I had this teacher, and she kept me in from recess because there was a question on some kind of a test or quiz or something that she felt like I should be able to answer, and I just didn't answer it right. And it felt like a month. It felt like 2 months. It was probably like a week. She kept me in from recess 5 days in a row or something like that. And I was at the point of just, I was so exasperated. I was just randomly guessing the answer. And I finally got it right. And I hated her guts so much for forever. And then I remember that moment one time in college that she just refused to let me quit about that. And looking back, like, she was a really good teacher and I hated her guts. But like, I was thinking, like, if that happened nowadays, she would have been fired so quickly. Because she would have been like, you're telling this Puerto Rican kid that he's just an idiot and he doesn't deserve to be with his friends at recess? Anyway, I don't know why I said that, but it just reminded me, what you're saying reminded me of that, because that would not have flown these days.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Can I talk
Matt, what's the next topic?
Do I have permission
and then
to
shut up.
How can I tee you guys up to talk without me? No, but I wanted to touch on something. I want to go back to what we were talking about, how easy it is for these doctrines to come in through the church. And while I had my, 20 minutes of silence while you guys were talking, I was thinking about this. I think that one of the root causes of where we are today with the CRT, influencing the church, with the people following away and having this Twitter Me Too moment, is that it's kind of a fruit of not having strong discipleship relationships in the church for a long time. I don't know about you, Alex. Have you experienced strong discipleship relationships through the church? Maybe you have.
Like being mentored by someone.
Yeah, the older men teaching the younger men, the older ladies teaching the younger ladies, church discipline, those kinds of things. Did you see that growing up?
Well, Matt, I grew up in the Calvary Chapel movement where we don't have church membership. And if there's church discipline, it's completely informal because there's no membership.
It's very hippie church discipline.
To all my friends in the Calvary Chapel movement, I love you, but there are some problems there. I think it happens by default sometimes, because I think the Spirit of God knows how to draw a straight line with a crooked stick. And so I think, while there's probably a bunch of churches that they haven't figured out, like, as an explicit value, we're going to value accountability or mentorship or one-on-one discipleship or whatever that is. I think it happens because there's social glue in some places. But honestly, my pastor, I'm so grateful for him. Our church and we're a part of a small Reformed church. It's the Bible Fellowship denomination, great denomination. There's about 70 churches, and we're Baptistic and Calvinistic, and I'm grateful for them. But our church was without a pastor for about a year, and we finally were able to appoint a new pastor in November. And I remember we had him and his wife over in our home, and he's our age. He's a young guy. It's his first pastorate. But he said to me, he's like, "Hey, how are you doing spiritually, man?" And I turned to him. I'm like, "Man, I work in a ministry. I work in full-time ministry, and I have for years. I don't remember the last time that somebody asked me how I'm doing spiritually." And it was this moment where it's like, that kind of discipleship is not as common as it needs to be. There is an emphasis on empire building, on attracting the biggest crowds. It's breadth, it's not depth. So yeah, absolutely, there's a lack of discipleship. I mean, that's a given.
And I feel like if we would be good at that, or at least start to bring that back, it would really help with the people that are starting to think about having just the seeds of these worldly philosophies come in where they could be addressed. If I was starting to think about, what about power structures and all this stuff, and I had an older, wiser person to talk with that through right away, it probably wouldn't get much farther with most people. And it would be something that was squashed. And if people were coming in and teaching non-biblical things, women pastors, the heresies that everyone accuses Stephen Furtick of, if there was church discipline, those things would be dealt with.
That dude is teaching some straight up Sabellianism. I'm just saying.
Dude, I learned so many heresies from Reformed people retweeting Stephen Furtick. I'm like just looking up all these, like, I've never heard of that one before. What did Stephen do this time? Or what did Stephen do this time? It's actually really educational for me.
You're such a squish.
This is why you're not a Calvinist yet, because you're literally getting your theology from Twitter. This is the problem.
It's Christian Twitter, though. Isn't that better?
Yeah, he's literally getting his theology from anti-Stephen Furtick tweets.
Right.
It's actually pretty decent theology if that's what you did.
I'm evolving. I'm constantly evolving, guys. But I think seriously, though, that has been one of the root causes of why we are at where we're at today, with dealing with the liberalism, dealing with the moving away from the biblical authority and all that stuff. If we would just have, been faithful to teaching the younger men and women, being faithful and doing church discipline, I feel like we would have been in a lot better place than we are today.
Do you guys know the song "These Are the Days of Elijah"?
I've been watching the comments, and yes, now I have Days of Elijah stuck in my head. Thank you very much, Micah and Brittany.
I remember I went to Brittany's her old church before we met, and they sang that song the day we went.
Which church was that? Where in the country?
New York City. It was called
okay.
I think it was called like Harvest Chapel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in Calvary Chapel of Philly. That's a big one. There's a couple thousand people.
Wow, that's crazy. All right, I wanted to go a day without talking about a Gospel Coalition article, but I couldn't do it.
What article? What happened?
We need prophets, not partisans, guys. We don't need tribalism.
That's true.
Okay.
We need to listen to the people in the pulpits.
I'm into it.
Did you guys read this article?
That's true. I did not.
Was that
you
supposed
didn't?
to?
Oh.
Tell me about it. Let's hear it.
Okay. First of all, wait. Before all you listeners think, Matt, you're so mean for just bringing up these random topics and not sharing with your co-host or guests what you want to talk about. You're just, leaving them out to dry. I go over this with them at least days before. Every time.
This is true. He did send a link. This is true. I can vouch for that. Matt, I have a job.
I thought we were just joking in that com box. I don't know.
And now's the insults and excuses. Victim. Yeah. But I do think it's kind of funny that.
Well, let's hear it. I want. This sounds interesting to me.
Okay.
I like prophets.
Well, honestly, it's a really long article, so I just picked out the keywords that were just the most appalling to me.
Wonderful.
But before we I just think it's kind of ironic that we're talking about tribalism and reading a book that's about tribes. Does anyone else find that funny? It's like God literally made
the Bible
of Judah.
Yeah,
we're Christians. We're supposed to.
No, hang on. That stuff that leads to kinism. Get out of get off that track. It's not the same thing. Don't become a kinist. But I do hear what you're saying. But so when I posted this tweet I tweeted this tweet the other day. About tribalism, but I used the word Balkanization. I think that's a good term. If you know anything about the Balkans, it's that it's the Serbs hate the Albanians and the Albanians hate the Serbs and the Bosnians. That's how it is. It's all of these ethnic groups constantly, dividing against each other, and you can't hold it together politically, anything like that. That's an accurate term. There's hostility that's baked into that. So there's every tribe and tongue in heaven, but tribalism means there's hostility there. And it's okay that there's tribes, right? Like there's a Reformed tribe, there's a Calvary Chapel tribe, there's a Theonomist tribe, there's a Baptist tribe.
The Gospel Coalition says it's not okay.
It's okay. You just can't hate each other. There's this thing called unity in Christ. There's
like
this
the Gospel Coalition hates us.
The Gospel Coalition, let's just take the name of that. Let's be a coalition that unites around the gospel that says, we disagree on secondary and tertiary issues, but it's still possible to remain, have unity in Christ. That's we kind of have to spend eternity with each other. So I'm just saying.
Amen. That's what this show is all about, guys. All about. So let me just read through some of these terms, and I'll stop us, or you guys can stop us. I feel like I've been talking this whole episode, guys. So if you please just chip in every once in a while, so I don't have to carry this thing.
If you're serious, I will gladly talk.
You insist.
Go ahead. But actually, I did look at this article, so you can go ahead and okay. I didn't read the whole thing, but
all right. Well, I just pull out some bullet points. So let's just go through this. We live in an all or nothing, use us or them times, guys. Gone are the days when nuanced was a good thing in life or politics. When was nuance ever a good thing, by the way? Do you guys ever think that nuance was good?
I love nuance. Listen, I've said this many times on my YouTube channel.
You're so winsome, AD.
I'm a nuanced guy, but nuance is one of the most abused things possible, because all of a sudden you're nuancing things that shouldn't be nuanced. Look, we should nuance where the Bible nuances, but definitely not where it doesn't. And too often we nuance where it doesn't nuance.
I like that. That's good.
That is good. But we should all be scared by these extremist times. But Christians especially should be unsettled.
What's the reason why?
Because extremism, guys, that we are extreme in our views. This is a little weird for this. To me, this is all very strange coming from a Christian perspective. Like,
yes, go ahead. You say what you're going to say, because I agree with you completely. Let's see where you're going.
Like, I'm just saying, like, if we just take a basic principle of Christianity, like, hey, take up your cross and follow me, that seems pretty extreme to me.
Or here's another one, Matt. Tell me if you think this sounds extreme. Every single person deserves to go to hell. Like, pretty extreme.
Right.
You guys are both onto something. I mean, I just want to say what has to be said. Wait for it. By what standard?
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Right? I think I can affirm on some level, sure, tribalism and, extreme and politicking, like we've all seen what that looks like. Obviously, there are unhealthy, but the problem is this is all being defined. I'm not hearing, give me Bible verses here. Okay. Right. So if we're going to go to like First Timothy, if we're going to go to like First Timothy, like, okay, like the man of God should not be quarrelsome. Okay. That's Bible. But like when you're using these terms, I just want to give me objectively what you're talking about, because anybody writing for The Atlantic can say like, well, American culture is divided in general. Well, polarization isn't automatically bad. The gospel is polarizing. There are things to be polarized about, and there's things to not be polarized about. So there's just,
yes.
Give me some definition.
Right. It's very important, because, to basically anyone that you talk to, if you talk to a random Tom, Dick, or Harry in the street and you ask them about any of our positions on the issue of abortion, they're going to say that's an extremist position. Any of us, Alex, I don't know what you say about abortion, but I'm pretty confident that whatever you would say would be labeled extremist by most people. And it's like, okay,
absolutely.
So there needs to be some content here. There needs to be some meat. And that's, to be honest, like I've been railing about Gospel Coalition for the last few weeks, few months, whatever. But that's really what it is. It's just there's a lot of high level words that you'd want to agree with, but there's no content. There's no meat. Here's an example. This article, Matt, that you said, it says this. It says, many Christians today are being more powerfully catechized by voices on cable news, talk radio, and podcasts than they are by voices from within the church. The average American Christian is likelier to have their views shaped by a political pundit than by a preacher. And so, first of all, I'd like them to prove that. Obviously, who knows if that's true or not. But the reality is, like there's no content here. So which views are at issue here? So let's just say for a second that everyone had their views shaped by a political pundit that said abortion is murder, but they weren't getting those views from their preacher. Well, is that an issue? Well, it's an issue with the preacher, not with the people. You know what I mean? It's not an issue with what they're hearing from the pulpit. Or I'm sorry, it's not the issue with what they're hearing from the pundit. It's actually an issue with what they're hearing from the pulpit. And so the reality is, like, the content, the meat here, we need to be specific. And that's the kind of thing, unfortunately, that in my opinion, Gospel Coalition avoids like the plague. And this is why people are getting their information from cable news, talk radio, and podcasts, and idiots like me on YouTube, because we're willing to give you the content, the actual meat. Whereas so often Gospel Coalition isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're very
by what standard?
Nuanced.
That's the question.
Yes, that is
too nuanced.
Very nuanced. And if you read this article all the way through, it's a pretty long article. You'll get the nuance that they're really trying to do a few things, but one of them is to make it acceptable to vote Democrat. And they say things like, to be an independent, nonpartisan thinker is intellectually taxing in a world of rapidly exploding options. And they say things like, we need to not be shaped by, the conservative pundits, and like some politicians need to vote on the other party side. It's like, just come out and say that you think that we should vote Democrat against Trump. And you should vote it's okay for you as a Christian to vote for the party of abortion. But they don't say stuff like that. And I think that makes us more attractive, honestly, AD.
Oh, totally. And this is a losing play on their part.
Yeah.
So let me play devil's advocate. So
perfect.
There is something that we can, we can very easily end up in our own echo chambers intellectually, right? Like if you were to look through my podcast feed right now, I'm sure you could guess, half of the podcasts that I'm subscribed to, right? I'm not subscribed to, I don't know, Preston Sprinkle. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that I'm subscribed to, like but my problem is again, I'm just not seeing. Okay, those are trends. Those are things in culture. Like, yeah, everybody's ending up in a little bit of an echo chamber. But show me where the sin is.
Right.
Okay. So that and that's the thing, because I can see that it's good to be healthy. It's good to be balanced, right? Like everybody should have voices that they slightly disagree with in their life. Some of my best friends I disagree with over some of the issues that we're talking about here tonight, and that's okay. And that's why I love them, because there's pushback and there's stuff like that. But I'm suspicious of anyone that wants to throw rocks at the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ. So anything that's like, well, Christians do X wrong. Well, you might be right. We probably all do. But that's Jesus's wife you're talking about. So, because it's really easy to write articles about Christians are doing X wrong, and all Christians and just kind of have these kind of base bottom shelf level things that, just everybody could notice. I would just, is that edifying? I don't know. I think there's a time and place for that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's what it is. It's just generalization. It's so general.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were
generalizations
playing devil's advocate.
I know. I thought I was going to play devil's advocate too, but like, I couldn't. I just couldn't.
That's the Jedi mind tricks that AD's learned from all his Star Wars movies.
But at the end of the day, though, I do sympathize with a lot of what you're saying, because I do agree with you that anyone who just loves throwing rocks at the church, it's really bothers me. But at the same time, like I don't know. I hear what you're saying. It gives me pause a lot of times to say some of the things that I say, because of that very reason, because it's way too easy to do that. The church does this wrong. Why the church gets this wrong? 5 reasons why this and that. Like that's just way too easy to do. There does need to be some nuance. I like the word nuance, Matt. I'm not joking. I actually do like it.
I don't like you. What are you talking?
Your face is priceless right there. I know Alex can't see us, but your face is priceless.
It's probably for the best, to be honest.
I hear you, man.
Well, and that's the thing too. We have to remember that there's like a lot of battles to be fought right now, and it could seem like we are being contentious and always trashing the church. And honestly, I think we do a pretty good job of focusing on things that are really critical, being specific, calling out specific people, trying to be gracious, willing to talk to them, willing to have them on our show. There's no one that we're not willing to have on our show. And because these things matter.
The fact that I'm here proves it.
I know. We'll take anybody.
Literally anyone.
Literally anybody. And so I totally agree. And like, there's definitely the things that aren't fundamentals and crucial. We definitely should be way more gracious and not be so critical about, especially in public.
I've got a question. I can play devil's advocate, and I think it's a question that Micah is actually bringing this up, and I would agree with that.
Advocate the devil.
So what's the difference? what's the difference here? Because I do this, and I think, Matt, we've done this on this show a number of times, where I wouldn't say we trash the leadership, but we criticize Gospel Coalition. We criticize the conference circuit. We criticize the movers and shakers. We call them Big Eva, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the difference there? Because like on the one hand, you don't want to trash the church, but on the other hand, we do this, and we were just kind of in a joking way talking about Furtick and Preston Sprinkle. It's hard for me to say his name without laughing, but you know what I mean, right? So what's the difference there? What is there a difference there, or are we just? Well, I'll just put that out there.
Alex, do you want to take this one?
I want to hear what you have to say, Matt.
Okay, this is what I think is the difference. Is there's a difference between trashing the whole church, and then there's a difference between talking about specific organizations and what they're doing wrong. And what I would say is trashing the church is saying, oh, every Christian is too judgmental. And I got this on Twitter this whole time. Anyone who believes the Bible, they're all abusive people and they're intolerant bigots, those kinds of things, versus saying something like, hey, the Gospel Coalition isn't putting out anything of quality, and they're actually damaging and doing articles that are hurting the church. Or this pastor is saying these things publicly that are a sin or heresy or whatever. This is wrong. This is why they're wrong. And I think it's more of a specific focused attack or criticism instead of just a general, this happens everywhere and this is the big problem. You can't ever pin down what I'm saying to be true or not because it's so general. I think that's kind of the difference of it.
I think I hear what you're saying. I think that makes sense. I want to attack it from a different angle. Okay. I don't think let's just trash nobody, right? Are we really talking about trashing? I don't think Christians should be trashing anyone, depending on what you call trashing. I mean,
yeah, you're right.
Okay, Jesus called the Pharisees a brood of vipers, so maybe that's trashing. But I think in this context, I don't think we're talking about trashing anyone. So you mentioned the Gospel Coalition. By the way, there are good articles on there. I have a friend who just had something published on there that was critical and it was helpful. The problem is I guess if we see something that we don't like, we tend to focus on that more. But there's still a lot of great, fantastic stuff on there. But we don't want to trash. So what are we doing? So with the SBC, with the guys who are and I'm not in the SBC, but with the guys that are in the SBC, I think what's most helpful is the ones that are saying like, hey, go to Orlando, go vote, go exercise your ability to influence this thing, go fellowship with your other SBC pastors and friends and recognize that we have responsibility for institutions. That's what I hear more conservative Southern Baptists saying. And I think let's just have that attitude. It's not about trashing anyone. It's just about saying where we have the ability to control things, let's control things. And a lot of that it relates to ministries that are parachurches or denominations. I think the problem is if I'm just going to lob out a generalization that I can't affect or I can't help with anybody else, then that's actually not helping. And part of the problem is we're all talking at a national level when the reality is like the problems for a church in Florida are going to be different from the problems for a church in New England, are going to be different from the problems in a church in Pennsylvania, or Birmingham, Alabama. There's places and pockets in the country where racism is still incredibly a problem inside of the church. And there's other places where the culture of that city has moved on from that a long time ago. So generalizations aren't helping anybody.
That's good. Do you guys want to hear how I've kind of thought about this in the past?
I do.
Here's what I've kind of thought. So first of all, I will say, Alex, I agree with you. We shouldn't be trashing anybody, essentially, that even our enemies for that matter. So that's number one. And I think that obviously sometimes you can't really help the criticism. Like if you're criticizing someone harshly, someone is going to think you're trashing them. That's just unavoidable, I think, sometimes. But do your best not to actually be trashing someone. But what I say is I look at Jesus's example, and I look at the people that he reserved his harshest criticism for, because Jesus did say some harsh things. And for me, and I could be missing something here, but almost without exception, I think Jesus, when he says harsh things, when he insults people intentionally, when he says things that maybe aren't couth, in some circles these days. It's usually
that's a very nuanced word choice.
Yes, that's right.
I don't like it.
I think it's usually people that are in authority, people that should know better, people that have a little bit of a platform, and so you don't see him, using the same kind of rhetoric with just an everyday kind of person, the woman at the well or the crowds. In fact, it says he has compassion on the crowds that have been led astray by certain leadership, which he calls a brood of vipers, which he says that whitewashed tombs, which he says you might as well be killed in the ocean with a big weight hung around your neck, that kind of thing. Like, that's pretty harsh language, but he doesn't say that about just the everyday people. You know what I mean? And that's one reason why I've chosen to kind of go after Gospel Coalition and ERLC so hard, because I see often in their rhetoric that principle inverted, where they protect the leadership and they don't name names and they don't talk about people that have authority and power and platforms, but they rip mercilessly the people in the pews that happen to vote for Trump. You know what I mean? Like, and so I kind of, that's kind of how I've seen it. Now, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right, but when I look at Jesus and what he did and how he spoke to people, that's how I see it. I don't see him ripping everyday folks that are, the flock essentially, but he does tend to rip those that are leading the flock astray. And that's why I've chosen Gospel Coalition as my target so often, because I see that inverted.
I'm about to preach up in here. Okay. Isaiah 42. So let kingdom of God on earth, right? God's law, beautiful stuff. The gospel changes hearts, changes cultures. Isaiah 42:4, he will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law, right? The power of Jesus, right? He's demolishing principalities, powers, putting all things under his feet, right? Until his return, right? But what do you have before that? Verse 2, he will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. So yeah, that's the person in the pew. You know what? Jesus has a different voice for the Pharisees, for the religious elites, for the professional Christians, for people like myself who are employed by ministries, right? Like there's a higher standard and there's a higher level of scrutiny, but for the people in the pew, for the moms, for whoever that is, it's like a bruised reed. He won't break it. It's a faintly burning wick. He won't even snuff it out. I mean, there's such gentleness of Christ with the sheep. Maybe that's why some of these articles that we see on large Christian blogs bug us the way that we do, because a lot of them are aimed at sheep, and it's just like, how are you going to pick on the sheep? How much are you going to pick on the sheep? I don't know. This is a theory.
I don't know. It's a theory of mine as well, and it's possible, because I do tend to feel like I'm rubbed the wrong way when it's like that. When it's just like, because I picture, everyone talks about how Trump voters have been ripped by the evangelical intelligentsia for the last few years, and I always just picture, like, there's some people in my mind, like right now, that go to my church, a farmer, and he wears overalls to church, and he wears boots, and there's muddy and stuff like that. And we went to the church picnic, he's wearing his Trump hat. And this guy just loves God. Like he's not racist. He's not evil. He just loves the Lord. He's a Republican. And this is the guy that, the elite are just like, they're just so fearful, and they're just like the worst people ever. And I really hate that kind of thing. I really do. And also on the liberal side, I really hate when those people are led astray as well, with all this victimhood stuff and things like that. Like, that's my family, man. And I know that this kind of stuff has affected my family. I don't know. It's an interesting theory. And that was a beautiful passage, man. Thanks for reading that, Alex.
I didn't write it.
I know. That's why thank you for reading it. It was very, very nice reading.
Yeah, he didn't say writing,
there you go.
For writing it.
Dramatic scripture readings with
That's
Alex Kocman.
Don't get too dramatic, though.
I don't know if I was the one who said trashing people, but if I did, I'm sorry. I should not have said that. You guys are right about that.
Did you? I don't
know if that was in the question, but whatever. But I should say that we should end with this, that it is really important, though, to examine our hearts. And are we doing this out of love? And I think that even the people that we criticize, if they would just, repent of that, what they're doing and change, then we'd welcome them in. It's not like they're a permanent adversary. We want reconciliation. We want unity. We want to be building each other up. And that should be our mindset, no matter when we're criticizing, being gentle, or being more harsh. I think that's something that we constantly have to be examining in ourselves, especially us that have platforms, podcasts.
You're just trying to not get
Did I leave you guys speechless? Oh, was it that profound? No, it's just time to go. Alex Kocman, thank you for joining us and providing us with such great wisdom and Bible reading. That was really great. Can you let us know one more time where to find you?
Yeah, you can get me on Twitter at AJKOCMAN. My website is alexkocman.com. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram too. Just search for my name there, and some articles, some podcasts there. But thanks for having me on, guys. This is enjoyable. This is just real conversations. I don't think anyone here is saying like our opinions are right about everything, or we're the experts, or we want to be the new, leaders in thought or whatever. I think this is just, three normal guys just talking about what we're seeing in the church. This is the kind of conversations that we all have already, probably around some of our dinner tables and things like that. And it's just refreshing to just be able to talk about these things and, think through it together.
Amen. Amen. AD, where can people find you since you're so bad at promoting yourself?
YouTube, AD Robles, ROBLES, or on Twitter, Real AD Robles.
Please give us all a subscribe. You can find me How to Build a Tent, and subscribe to our Reformgelical YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please join us next Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. You can be part of the show and you can help support us. And if you don't want to do that, you can find us every Friday. We release the show to the public on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Saying goodnight for all of us. Talk to you next time. God bless.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.